Bill Lishman. Here's a hard man to introduce. He lives about an hour's drive northeast, I think, of Toronto, in a series of silos. I've had them described to me, connected by tunnels so that much of the architecture and the furniture and the appliances in the house have to be round. I love that idea. It reminds me of that round-faced television set. But I'm hoping Bill will tell me what it's like to live in. He's also an artist, given to very big pieces, monumental pieces. He did a copy of Stonehenge, made out of smashed up old cars. Interesting. But all of us may be most familiar with him because of this very curious thing that he did. He taught a bunch of Canada Geese how to fly behind him as he was flying in his ultralight. And that became the stuff of legend. Interestingly enough, it was ABC that did, I think, the first big story about him in the USA. And subsequently, it went on to be this wonderful and famous motion picture, Fly Away Home. I'm sure lots of you have seen it. So I know that Bill's gone on to new creatures. I think it's sandhill ganders or gooses. Where are you, Bill? Come up here and help me figure out which of your feathered friends are going to benefit from your interest. The reason he does this is encompassed in an organization that he set up called Operation Migration. It's in this way that he helps to preserve these wonderful creatures by teaching them new migration routes. Have I got that straight?
You got it right. You've given my presentation.
All right, Bill. I'm stunned by it all, and I can hardly wait. Away you go.
Thank you. Well, I'm visually oriented, so my son and daughter put together a lovely PowerPoint presentation under my direction, of course, and I'll lead it off. If that is up on the, when does that go on the screen? Does that go on the screen soon? Hopefully, if I press this button, does it go on the screen? Yes. I pressed the wrong button, so you go back. And here's the pitch. Here's the pitch. This is a little animation done by my son, who is studying computer animation. And we'll lead it off with this. There it is. But the real pitch is this. I'm a student of evolution, and my mother, being a biologist, taught me about the reverence for nature at an early age. I believe that we've evolved beyond evolution, and I like to call it evolution really is a creative continuum. Things keep changing all the time, and they move toward better harmony, more beauty, and better everything in the world. That's the best way of this creative continuum. I also believe that our planet is an entity unto itself, a great massive being. I follow the teachings of James Lovelock, who calls it Gaia, the great spirit of the earth, that we are just one of the cells in what the human race is. And he says that he defines the planet as an immense superorganism, a coherent system of life, self-regulating and self-changing. And I go along with that. So I'm going to show you a few of my sculptures, and these are really just studies of some of the life species on the planet and this creative continuum. And in the end, I'll show you a couple of things that I think is the future for us. The creative continuum, I title this. I start off here with a dragonfly, which is one of the original flyers on the planet. Dates back 400 million years, and this is my study of it. It's a 6-foot wingspan dragonfly. I wish we had them like that because they eat mosquitoes. and that they would have a voracious appetite. A few years ago, I did a sculpture for the town of Campbellton, New Brunswick. I claim to have landed the biggest fish in Canada. It's a 27-foot salmon. They had an idea that it should be on a plaque. I had an idea that it should look alive, and that's how it looked. I'll go through these fairly quickly because there's a story with each one, and I don't want to get bogged down in them. A life-size eagle for a film called The Last Buffalo. It was the second ever 3D IMAX film. A great way to exhibit your sculpture in an IMAX film, a 3D IMAX film. Some of you may have seen it. It opened the fair in Osaka, Japan in 1990. And there's The Last Buffalo out of The Last Buffalo. The quick story with that, I showed it to an ex-oil billionaire just as a little photograph. And he asked me if it was for sale, and I told him, yeah. And he says, how much? And I told him $50,000, and he says, it's mine. It's the easiest presentation I ever made in my life. I like to work in wireframe, in real wireframe, not this computer wireframe, and that's a Percheron horse I love those huge draft beings. And more recent work, this is one of 25 pieces that is on the roof garden of the Princess Margaret Hospital here in Toronto, a celebration of human spirit for those that are in the cancer ward there and can't go out for them to look at. Some of these pieces, they're doing the lambada in this one. And just threw this one in because it's kind of interesting. This isn't the way I normally work, but in the late 60s when sort of minimal art was in, I'm not a minimal art person, but I thought, well, I'll do one just for fun. And going through a scrapyard, I found the frame members off an old bus, welded it on a base, painted it orange and yellow, and entitled it Yellow Dandelions in a Green Field, and it won the Best Sculpture Award at the City Hall that year. Marshall McLuhan says, art is anything you can get away with. My wife Paula, who's out here in the audience and is renowned in her world of fur fashion, needed to learn how to knit, and she needed a rocking chair, so this is what I designed for her. More popular with retired farmers and bikers, because you can do wheelies with it. And I did, for those who saw Fly Away Home, there are some true parts in it. The lunar lander was a creation I did back in 1970, and it was purchased by the Japanese. I won't get into that story, it's a little long. Transcending the Traffic in Expo 86, it has another title. It's a celebration of legs, of our leg transportation or our land transportation. And actually I put Tina Turner at the top because she had the best legs. And as Moses referred to, this is not Stonehenge, this is Autohenge. And it didn't last as long as Stonehenge. All the cars are about the same weight as one of the stones of Stonehenge, but it really showed me that we do have an inherited memory, because I don't know how many people walked into that and had a deja vu. It was quite remarkable, and there's another shot of it. This last piece here I call the Exhausted Man. That's a monument to all of us who had to get down on and wire the muffler back on beside the freeway, and that's where I exhibited it. I'm not a gallery person, and we're talking about the underground and how to live a little better on the planet. And I believe that we're not meant to live in boxes and on the surface, so that it might be better if we lived in the earth. And so this is some of my research into what it'd be like to live underground, easy to work in snow in the wintertime and create small domes. They call them igloos. And it really inspired some of these original sketches. And then by 1990, Paula knitted her fingers to the bone and made enough money so we could go ahead and build this. There's a few construction shots. That shot, we call it the mud wasp view of our house under construction. Give you an idea, it's about 80 feet across. And the central dome is, I should talk in meters, right, 7.5 meters. And this is a little walk through it. So there you are, Moses, you can see it. It's not really silos, it is a series of onion-shaped domes. The kitchen here, which was one of the most difficult design problems, because designing, nothing at Home Depot fits this. Right? And we're walking into the living room here, and my daughter, who just graduated from high school, is here with her friends. This was taken 2 days ago. And she's enjoying the living room with one of her friends from high school, who hangs out there. And we bypassed the bedroom because the bed wasn't made, and a bit of the bathroom. Another shot of the skylight. There it goes up to the skylight, and it really gives you a feeling of space and light. There's more light in this house, and there's no electric lights on at this point, and it was a dull day, so you can see that it is. You have a feeling of light and space, and you don't miss looking outdoors. But if we want to look outdoors, we go out into this room, and this is the view we have to the north, looking toward Lake Skugog. It's a beautiful piece of land that we were able to acquire way back when. And of course, designing things for the kitchen was a bit tricky, and the refrigerator needed a redesign. That's the way a refrigerator should be. Never mind this, open the box and all the cold air falls out, and then you have to grope in the back on your hands and knees for things. You pop it up, it's a Lazy Susan, and you've got it. As Moses was saying about my flying, I learned to fly the same way the birds did, because I'm colorblind, and they wouldn't give me a license back when I first went out. So I learned by running off the hill. This is my second glider. My first one didn't last long enough to get a picture of. It landed in a field of corn, of course. We landed in the field. After 2 years, I had 11 minutes of flying and 50 hours of carrying it back up the hill. And so I put a motor on. And this is my first powered flight. It kind of looks like a wounded albatross, but I get airborne, and just hanging from my armpits, and I have this little engine behind, give you the noise. That's what it sounded like. And fortunately, Paula operating the camera caught one of my better landings. So out of that, of course, grew the ultralight movement in the late 70s and early 80s, and I developed this little aircraft that I could wander around through the countryside at low altitude and fly with birds. And it took me about 3 years to get these Canada Geese to fly in formation with me, and it was an absolute wonderful feeling. I was just speaking with Mr. Spong, who works with orcas, and I was telling him flying with the birds must be like swimming with the whales. It's very similar. You're in this huge ocean of air, and it's their medium, and you learn so much by watching them. They're quite wonderful. This is a shot from our first migration, crossing Lake Ontario with neither shoreline visible, and this little engine going in the background. Fortunately, it didn't falter. And out of that grew this Operation Migration concept, and this photograph of my partner, Joe Duff, became the logo for that organization. It's a nonprofit. And our main aim is to try and establish new migration routes for endangered species, particularly the whooping crane, because these larger birds learn migration from previous generations. In 1940, there was only 16 of these birds left. There is currently 177, one migratory flock that migrates from the Northwest Territories down into Texas. So if we can establish a second backup flock that parallels their flight, it would go a long way toward ensuring their existence. And this is a little image of of last year's migration with sandhill cranes, which is it was the forerunner to what we will be doing this year, the first year with whooping cranes. And as you can see, we wear costumes, etc. It's not too hard to get the birds to follow you in the air. The big trick is to keep them wild, because one of our early experiments with sandhill cranes, they became imprinted on people and were landing in all sorts of, they're landing in schoolyards, and actually 3 of them landed in downtown Peterborough and walked into a bar one day. So the final thing was they landed in a prison, and we had to go and bust them out. So the costume really works well. And also the auditory thing. We've been working with a German engineer who has designed an auditory system on the aircraft that plays, there's the speaker on the leg of the aircraft, and we play the actual sounds of cranes in there. And they have a whole vocalization. We have a little keyboard. We can play the contact call or the flight call or the alarm call, and it works great. So this, during the migration, this is the land migration of our ground crew that goes with it. We get to go up in the air and see these beautiful birds in their own element, while we have about 7 vehicles that, and so we flew these birds from Wisconsin to Florida last year. That will be the track. As I say, it's 1,250 miles, and it gives you a little bit of the imagery of what it's like. The wonder of it all is seeing the planet from those birds' point of view, because we fly at dawn at very low altitude and very low speed. We see the sunrise every morning, and the low light going, the golden light coming through all of the various terrain that we're covering is absolutely spectacular. They have it figured out, birds have it figured out. You go south in the winter, and you move with the sun, and you're always dining on fresh food because you're moving with the spring and with the fall. It's either the harvest or the young shoots. As you can see, this gives you some of the image of what it's like. This is one of our 32 stops en route. We have to find wild areas to land them in all the way, and that's quite a difficult feat in this day and age where everything seems to be populated. So we find farms and remote airstrips, and this is over Indiana, and just southern Indiana, and these poor guys having to drive these big vehicles on the freeways. So it's kind of like driving with, flying with blinders on. Anyway, these birds made it to all to Florida last fall. 12 of them. We started with 12 and we wound up with 11. We lost one en route, last 2 en route actually. I think I get my figures mixed up. But anyway, we left them there over winter, and they did remain wild. They didn't land in anybody's backyards. They returned this spring on their own. It took them 2 months from leaving Florida, and they all landed back at the spot. So that cleared the way, and Gail Norton yesterday, the U.S. Secretary of the Interior, signed the final law that allows us to raise a flock of whooping cranes this fall. Well, they've hatched, and they're being imprinted as we speak, and this fall we'll fly those birds south, and hopefully in 5 to 10 years we'll establish a breeding flock of 25 birds, or 25 pairs, I would say. And that will. This is the route that we flew on one side of your screen. Which side it is? Anyway, the long one is the one that the current flock of 177 fly, and the short one is the one that we're flying. And believe me, that's long enough. To wind this up, I've thought of a lot of things about seeing the world from that point of view, and the atmosphere is our largest piece of real estate that is yet to be developed, you might say. And I thought, what would I love as a retirement home? And I'll just show you my son Jordy's animation of my understanding of. Or my idea of the ideal retirement home, and that discus-shaped thing you see is about a kilometer in diameter, and the outer edge of it are all condominiums. There are 1,000 condominiums around the outer edge, and it is lighter than air. It lifts off. It has a number of places that will station. It's kind of like the cruise ship of the air, an upstep from the dirigible. Because of its shape and its rotation, it's far more stable. And so you'd have your home on this, and it would cruise across at low speed, like you see it there, across the continent, and spend the summers in the high Arctic, and you'd have a new view every day you got up, and in the fall you would come down and it would stop in Toronto or New York at one of these spots and move south, so it's in the southern hemisphere during the winter. And there's one of the picture windows of the condominium, and I call it pie in the sky. And my son Jordy calls it fly away home. So it can be either one. And that kind of wraps up my presentation to you. If you want to check further on the progress of our migration, we have a website which is operationmigration.org, one word, .org. It's www, etc. I should have that as a slide that goes up here. And thank you very much.
So, can I ask you some questions? Sure. Yeah. Just like, do the birds become individuated? I mean, can you recognize Sydney?
Absolutely. There's a whole microcosm of personalities within each flock. And you get the aggressive one, and the one that's the friendliest, and the one that's kind of aloof and stands off, and the one that's kind of the geek, and there's a whole.
So you have to deal with those personalities.
Oh, you have to deal with all of those personalities.
And do they remember you the following year?
When we were working with geese, a number of geese would come back and land on my backyard every year at the same time. You could set your clock by it and honk outside. They made it up with wild birds and the to the wild mates. It was like, I don't want to go home to your parents' place. They would be standing off, and the one that we'd flown south with would be outside the door honking away, saying, "Come on out, we're here." And you'd go out, and they were just so happy to see you. It was absolutely wonderful. That happened about 5 years in a row. And not
when
all.
They flew into that bar, like, what did the bartender say?
Yeah, there's a bunch of good lines there. It was more fun when they flew into the Millhaven Correctional Institute. The prisoners just loved them. We couldn't get them out of there because they were getting fed like they were royalty. And I suppose the image for the prisoners was, here's these birds that have got the freedom to leave and they don't even leave. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we all have an enormous number of questions, and I hope you're sticking around. So
I'll be here for 3 days.
Yeah. But I do have a last question. What's the price of one of those condos in?
Well, it's $2 million, and if you give me $200,000 right now, I'll hold one for you.
All right. As that fella in Texas said, it's mine.
You got it.
It's mine.